Family missed my graduation and casually said, "We didn't think you'd care that much about the ceremony." I laughed and quietly went on vacation alone. A day later, my phone blew up when they realized, "Turns out I do care." That was the caption. Just 4 words under a photo of me on a quiet stretch of beach, drink in hand, sun dipping low behind me, and a look on my face that said more than any long-winded message ever could. I dropped it into the family group chat without fanfare. No explanation, no context. Just that photo. Within minutes, my phone began vibrating like a live wire. But let me rewind. My graduation fell on a Saturday this spring. Not just any degree, a master's in environmental science I'd worked on for 3 grueling years while holding down a full-time job. Night classes, weekend study sessions, research papers written at 3 a.m. The thesis alone nearly broke me, 300 pages on sustainable coastal development that my advisor called genuinely groundbreaking. Those words had meant everything to me. Not once did I complain about it to my family. When Mom asked why I wasn't around for Sunday dinners anymore, I explained about the night classes. She nodded, said something about always with your head in the clouds, and changed the subject to my sister's newest home renovation project. When Dad questioned the point of more school after I already had a perfectly good bachelor's degree, I tried to explain my passion for the research, the doors it could open. He shrugged, said well, as long as you're paying for it yourself, and turned back to the game. I told myself their lukewarm response was fine. Not everyone gets excited about academic achievements. I understood that. I wasn't expecting a parade or some elaborate celebration. I'm not that kind of guy, but I thought they'd want to be there. Maybe take a few photos, maybe grab dinner after. I'd sent the invitation 6 weeks earlier with a handwritten note explaining how much it would mean to have them there. I followed up twice. "We'll try to make it," was all I got from my mom. Lindsay, my sister, said, "That weekend's tough with Ella's soccer schedule, but maybe." My dad never responded directly, just asked if I was still doing that school thing when we spoke on the phone about fixing his computer. I told myself it was enough that they knew about it. That they'd make an effort. That surely, they understood this wasn't just some routine event but the culmination of years of sacrifice. The morning of graduation, I woke early. Couldn't sleep, really. There was a nervousness I hadn't anticipated, not about the ceremony itself, but about finally celebrating this milestone with my family. Would they be proud? Would they finally understand why this mattered so much to me? I checked my phone habitually, assuming a message would come through any second. "On our way." Or "see you soon." Or even just "good luck today." Silence. I showered, shaved carefully, put on the new shirt I'd bought specifically for the occasion. The tie my grandfather had given me before he passed, the one family member who'd always believed in my academic pursuits. As I knotted it in the mirror, I found myself talking to him. "Wish you were here for this one, Gramps." The tie was deep green with tiny silver patterns. "The color of growth," he'd said when he gave it to me after high school graduation. For the man who never stops learning. By noon, as I put on my cap and gown, still nothing from my family. I thought, maybe they're driving in and didn't text. Maybe they'll just show up. Maybe it's supposed to be a surprise. I drove to campus alone, parked in the crowded lot, and joined the stream of black-robed graduates making their way toward the auditorium. All around me, families were already gathering. Parents straightening their children's hoods, siblings teasing each other about tripping on stage, grandparents dabbing proud tears. I kept my phone in my hand, waiting for it to buzz with news of their arrival. The ceremony began at 2. I filed in with my department, took my assigned seat, and scanned the audience as the procession continued. The auditorium was vast, packed with faces. I searched for familiar ones among the sea of proud families. My row, my section, the balcony. Nothing. The university president spoke about achievement and perseverance. The commencement speaker, a renowned scientist whose work I'd studied and admired, talked about using knowledge to change the world. I should have been soaking in every word, but instead, I kept glancing back at the entrance doors, wondering if they'd slipped in late. Then they called my name. Daniel James Wright, Master of Science in Environmental Studies, with distinction. I forced a smile as I crossed the stage, my name echoing through speakers to applause from strangers whose relatives had bothered to show. The dean shook my hand, whispered excellent work on that thesis, and for a brief, shining moment, I felt the weight of my accomplishment. But as I moved my tassel from right to left and returned to my seat, the hollow feeling returned. The people who had known me my entire life, who should have been most invested in this moment, weren't there to witness it. Afterward, I waited outside, still in my regalia, as families took photos, offered flowers, shared embraces. A classmate's grandmother pressed a box of homemade cookies into my hands, saying, "For the smart young man my grandson always talked about." I thanked her, touched by the gesture from a woman who barely knew me. I checked my phone. The group chat was active, all right, just not about me. There was a long chain of messages. My sister, Lindsay, sharing pictures of her toddler Ella's soccer game with the caption "Future Olympic Star." My mom talking about the farmer's market, how she'd found the perfect herbs for her garden. Dad forwarding some sports highlights I didn't bother to open. Everyone chimed in. Everyone except me. And my graduation? Not a whisper. I told myself it didn't matter. I had dinner alone at a restaurant I'd been saving for this occasion, a small Italian place near campus where the owner knew me from my late nights of studying over endless cups of coffee. Marco congratulated me, brought a complimentary tiramisu with "Congratulations Graduate" written in chocolate on the plate. I tried to focus on the good. I'd earned this degree myself. Paid for it myself. The accomplishment was still real, still mine. But that night, staring at the diploma case on my coffee table, the silence wasn't peaceful. It was deafening. Years of work, of sacrifice, of believing this path meant something, and the people who should have cared the most couldn't even send a text. The next morning, still no messages. I showered, made coffee, and stared out my apartment window at the city below. Life continuing as normal for everyone else. I picked up my phone, considered letting it go. What would be the point of reaching out? If they hadn't remembered by now, did I really want to force an obligatory, belated congratulations? But something in me needed to know. Needed to hear them say it, whatever it was. So I sent one. Just a simple line in the group chat. "Hey, just realized, none of you made it yesterday." It was my graduation. It was meant to be gentle. A nudge. A reminder. I expected someone to apologize, maybe say it slipped their mind. I imagined my mom's mortified response, my dad's gruff but sincere regret, my sister's flurry of excuses followed by a genuine "I'm so sorry." Instead, Lindsay replied, "We didn't think you'd care that much about the ceremony." That was it. 7 words that landed like a punch to the chest. I stared at it for a while, rereading it as if maybe I was misinterpreting the tone. I wasn't. That sentence did more damage than a full day of silence. 3 years of my life, of late nights and early mornings, of missed family gatherings and postponed vacations, all for something they assumed I wouldn't care that much about. I didn't reply. Not then. Not with words. I smiled quietly, set my phone down, and opened a browser. There's a trip I'd talked about for years, a place I'd always dreamed of visiting. Costa Rica, something about the combination of rainforests and beaches, the sense that it's a whole world away where conservation and science were valued, always called to me. Every time I brought it up, someone in my family would scoff. "That's a lot of money for sand and water. Wouldn't you rather go somewhere practical? You can't do that kind of trip alone, it's depressing." But suddenly, I wanted exactly that. I didn't need company. I didn't need permission. I needed a reset. To remember who I was and what I valued before years of family indifference had made me question it. So I booked the ticket. Paid in full. No points, no discounts. Just peace. First class, even, a graduation gift to myself. Then I packed my bags, made sure work was squared away with a hastily requested leave of absence. My boss, who'd attended my graduation with his wife, was surprisingly understanding, and slipped out the door. No one knew. I didn't leave a note. Didn't post anything. Just boarded the plane and disappeared. And that's where the story begins. Not at graduation, not with the silence, but with the moment I chose to stop asking to be seen. The airport buzzed with the usual chaos, overhead announcements, the rush of people weaving through security. But for me, every sound became a gentle reminder of leaving it all behind. I checked my single suitcase, moved through TSA pre-check with practiced efficiency, and found my gate with time to spare. I remember sitting there, watching families corralling excited children, couples leaning into each other, friends checking last-minute details, and feeling, for the first time, like the silence around me was a choice. I realized that every congratulatory text, every "we're proud of you" I'd waited for would never come. It was liberating in its own way. Boarding the plane, I settled into my window seat, watching the familiar cityscape shrink beneath me. I wasn't sad. Not really. I felt a quiet thrill at the thought of solitude, the freedom to just be without the weight of family expectations. For as long as I could remember, I'd been the reliable one. The one who fixed things, who showed up, who listened to everyone's problems and never complained about his own. The flight was long enough for me to sink into a reverie. I pulled out my graduation program, ran my fingers over the embossed lettering of my name, the specialty I'd chosen, the honors notation. All those nights of exhaustion and doubt, all for this moment that should have been shared but wasn't. With every mile, those pages seemed to whisper promises of a new beginning. I ordered a glass of champagne, my first real celebration, and watched the clouds drift by beneath us. A woman across the aisle noticed the program in my hand and offered a genuine congratulations. We talked briefly about my field of study, her own work in marine biology years ago. "It's important work," she said before putting her headphones back on. "The world needs more people who care about what happens to it." The simple validation from a stranger made my throat tight. Hours later, the plane descended over a coastline that looked almost surreal, verdant rainforests meeting golden beaches, a deep blue ocean stretching endlessly. I stepped off into a gentle warmth that immediately washed over me, melting the remnants of that cold, biting disappointment from home. I felt an odd calm. Here, the world was vast and indifferent, and I was free to define my own worth. My first night was spent in a modest bungalow perched on a hillside that overlooked the sea. I sat on the small porch, a cool cocktail in hand, and listened to the rhythmic lap of waves, a soothing metronome that replaced the discord of silence I'd endured back home. Every sound, every breath of wind seemed to validate my choice. The tiny geckos that skittered across the ceiling, the distant calls of howler monkeys from the jungle behind me, the rustling palms, they felt more present, more real than the hollow congratulations I might have received out of obligation. I wasn't running away. I was moving towards something real, a life that wouldn't rely on hollow family rituals. Yet, as I drifted off to sleep under a sky so clear it felt like a cosmic promise, I couldn't help but think this was more than a vacation. It was a silent declaration that I deserved better. And with that realization, the journey was no longer just an escape, it was the first step toward a life where my achievements mattered, where my happiness mattered most. The morning light streamed through gauzy white curtains as the waves rolled in, steady, unbothered. I sat cross-legged on the porch again, barefoot, my coffee cooling beside me. That familiar ache in my chest, the one that had followed me for years like a shadow, felt quieter now. Not gone. Just lighter. I had no plan for the day, no itinerary, no one expecting me to check in or report back. And for the first time in a long while, that didn't feel lonely. It felt like breathing room. Around mid-morning, I wandered down to the beach. The sand was warm, the water unbelievably clear. I found a tucked-away spot beneath a leaning palm, laid back in a sun-worn chair, and ordered a drink from the nearby beach bar. It came in a tall glass with fruit and a little paper umbrella, ridiculous, indulgent, and perfect. A book from my field, one I'd been meaning to read for pleasure rather than research, lay open on my lap. The words seemed to flow differently here, freed from the pressure of citation and analysis. This was knowledge for its own sake, the reason I'd fallen in love with environmental science in the first place. That's when the idea struck me. I pulled out my phone, opened the group chat. No one had said anything since Lindsay's dismissive "we didn't think you'd care that much about the ceremony" reply. The same thread where birthdays were usually flooded with heart emojis and inside jokes. Where they'd once posted 17 messages about my niece's lost tooth. Silence. I lifted my phone and framed the shot, the beach behind me, drink in hand, my feet barely in view. But it was my expression that mattered most, a half smile, not smug, but calm. Like I had stumbled into something sacred. In the background, you could just make out the edge of my thesis printout serving as a makeshift coaster for my drink, a small, private joke to myself. Click. I tapped the screen. No message. Just the photo. And then beneath it, I typed. Turns out I do care. Send. Then I turned my phone off. I didn't wait for the reaction. Didn't wonder how they'd interpret it. I just slid the phone into my bag, closed my eyes, and let the sun warm my face. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting to be chosen. I had chosen myself. It started with a buzz. Then another. I didn't turn my phone on right away. I let it sit there, muted and vibrating deep in the canvas of my beach bag, like a panicked heartbeat trying to be heard. It wasn't until the sun began its slow descent behind the horizon, casting the water in copper and blood orange hues, that I picked it up again. 37 missed notifications. Group chat alive again after a full day of radio silence. The first message came from my mom. Wait, where are you? Then Lindsay, was that real? Are you actually gone? Then the others started pouring in. Dad, who rarely texted, you could have told someone you were leaving, which was rich, coming from a man who didn't even remember to show up for the culmination of my 3-year academic journey. My younger cousin even chimed in. Dang, that's a power move. He always liked drama, even if he didn't understand it. But most of the messages weren't curious. They were defensive, confused, panicked. Like they had all suddenly realized something was missing from their carefully arranged little orbit, and that thing was me. Lindsay sent 3 voice notes in a row, none of which I played. The preview text alone told me what I needed to know. Okay. I didn't mean it like that. We just thought you never made a big deal of ceremonies. I was having a rough day too, you know. Ella was upset about losing and I had to deal with that. There it was. The slow pivot from indifference to justification to guilt. My mom started texting separately from the group chat. Daniel, please don't be dramatic. We didn't realize it was so important to you. You've always been so independent. Even my uncle, who rarely engaged with family matters, messaged, everyone's worried. Just let them know you're safe, at least. And the thing is, I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. Not in the way I used to be back when I still hoped they'd wake up one day and just see me. What I felt now was something colder, cleaner, done. Not dramatic, not explosive. Just done. They didn't even realize how long I'd been fading out of the family photo, backgrounded by louder voices and shinier stories. How many years I'd been handing over parts of myself, time, energy, care, and getting crumbs in return. How often I'd laughed off being overlooked just to keep the peace. Like the time I'd published my first academic paper, sent them all copies, and not one of them mentioned reading it. Or when I received a small grant for my research and called to share the news, only to have the conversation redirected to Lindsay's kitchen renovation within minutes. But that one sentence, "We didn't think you'd care that much about the ceremony." That cracked it wide open. And now they were scrambling, desperate to rewind something that had been unraveling for years. But I wasn't interested in rewinding. I was already somewhere else, somewhere warmer, quieter, mine. The island had a rhythm of its own. By the second morning, I woke not to an alarm, not to the drone of emails or half-hearted family group messages, but to the sound of waves breathing in and out like a heartbeat older than time. I moved slower. I chewed longer. I noticed things, the shape of clouds, the way sunlight filtered through palm fronds, the laughter of strangers who didn't know my name and didn't need to. I signed up for a guided hike through the nearby rainforest preserve. Our guide, a local man named Carlos with encyclopedic knowledge of the ecosystem, lit up when I mentioned my degree. Environmental science? Then you must come see our conservation project. He adjusted the tour on the spot, showing me areas where reforestation efforts were succeeding, explaining challenges with local water systems. For hours, I was just a scientist, a curious mind, someone whose knowledge and passion were valued without question. Carlos introduced me to colleagues at the preserve, and we exchanged contact information. "We always need researchers," he said casually. "Especially ones who understand coastal development pressures." It was the first time in years I didn't feel like I was bracing for something. No one expected anything of me here. No one was disappointed or unimpressed. No one kept me around out of obligation or convenience. I wasn't a placeholder son, the overlooked sibling, the friend who always remembered birthdays no one returned. I was just a guy with expertise that mattered, drinking coffee on a porch overlooking the sea. And that was enough. Back home, the messages didn't stop. My cousin Tyler sent a long paragraph about how everyone had been really busy lately and meant to attend. My mom called twice, then left a voicemail I didn't listen to. The group chat kept buzzing, threads unraveling with apologies wrapped in excuses. "Mom, we should have been there. I know that now. But you've always been so quiet about your accomplishments. We never know what's important to you. Lindsay, I'm sorry for what I said. It came out wrong. Of course you care about your graduation. We just didn't realize how much." Even my dad, ever blunt, sent a message that almost shocked me. "Look, maybe we messed up. But you're making a big deal out of one missed graduation. We've been to plenty of your things over the years." That's when I knew. They still didn't get it. It wasn't about the graduation. Not really. It was about being forgotten so effortlessly that when I reminded them, they thought I was the one being dramatic. They thought silence was something I wouldn't mind because I never made noise, because I'd never demanded to be heard. I'd always laughed, always shrugged, always swallowed it down. But I wasn't hungry anymore. That afternoon, I sat at a small beach cafe. The ocean just beyond the railing. A woman at the next table smiled at me. Not in a flirty way, just kindness, recognition. It felt strange, being seen so easily by someone who didn't know a single thing about me. She was reading a book on marine conservation, one I'd studied extensively for my thesis. We struck up a conversation that drifted from academic theory to practical application. She was a professor on sabbatical, working with a local university on developing sustainable tourism practices. "The hardest part," she said, "is helping people see that preservation isn't just about saving pretty fish or nice beaches. It's about creating systems where human needs and environmental health aren't in constant opposition." I found myself talking more than I had in months, ideas flowing freely. She listened with genuine interest, asked insightful questions, challenged my assumptions in ways that made me think deeper rather than defend myself. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across our table, she said something that stayed with me. "You know what I like about scientists? They notice things other people miss. They pay attention. That's a rare gift." And I thought, this is the life I want. Not the one where I keep trying to prove I deserve space in other people's plans. The one where I build something from stillness, from peace, from the startling, beautiful quiet of being enough on my own. That night, I watched the moon drag its silver trail across the water like it had somewhere to be and wasn't in a rush. I sat alone, no music, no phone, just the sound of insects and the slow churn of the tide. And I realized something. I'd never been lonely here. Not once. Which was strange, because for years, I thought solitude was the thing I feared most. I'd filled every corner of my life with people, family, friends, coworkers, always trying to be useful, likable, agreeable, always available, always saying yes. I thought staying connected meant staying safe. That being forgotten was the worst thing that could happen. But the truth, the worst thing wasn't being forgotten. It was remembering, in those quiet, aching moments, just how little space you ever really took up in the places you thought were yours. I used to believe love meant patience. That if I kept showing up, kept giving, kept shrinking myself to fit their world, eventually someone would notice. Someone would say, "Hey, we see you. We're grateful. You matter." But they didn't. And now that I was gone, they did what they always do. They reacted. Not because they missed me, but because they missed the version of me who made everything easier for them. They missed the available me. The quietly dependable me. The one who didn't ask for much and took whatever scraps of affection were thrown his way. But that version of me, he stayed home. The man on this island, the one with sand between his toes and a spine that finally straightened under the weight of no one else's expectations, he was something different. He was done performing, done waiting, done belonging to people who only noticed his absence, never his presence. When I finally turned my phone back on, 3 days since I'd sent that photo, the screen lit up like a slot machine. Over 100 missed notifications, voicemails stacked on top of each other, missed calls from numbers I recognized by heart, and a few I didn't. The group chat was unrecognizable now. Where there used to be one-liners and lazy memes, there were long, frantic messages, one after another. "Mom, please call me. I didn't realize how hurt you were. We can plan a small celebration when you're back. Your father feels terrible. Dad, you could have just talked to us instead of disappearing. This isn't like you, Daniel. Lindsay, I didn't mean it that way. I swear. We can plan something for when you're back. A proper graduation dinner with everyone. Uncle Joe, your mom's really upset. Can you just text her? Lindsay again, seriously? Ignoring us now? This is childish." Then not long after. "Okay. I'm sorry. I was out of line. Please just let us know you're safe." Guilt, anger, pleading, back to guilt. They cycled through every emotion but the one that might have mattered most, understanding. They weren't sorry for what they did. They were sorry that I finally reacted to it. And yet I read every word. It would have been a lie to say I didn't feel something. A small part of me, the same part that used to stay up late remembering moments where I'd wait for them to notice the extra effort I made, the help I offered, the achievement I earned, still wanted a fix. Still wanted someone to step up and say, "We were wrong," but none of them did. They just wanted it to blow over, wanted me to come back, resume my role. Let the silence return to its familiar, comfortable place. So I gave them a silence that was louder. I muted the group chat. One by one, I tapped the names, selected, blocked, and felt a strange sense of peace every time the confirmation popped up. There was no satisfaction, just clarity. This wasn't about punishing anyone. It was about freeing myself from the echo chamber of being tolerated. Then finally, I opened my contacts list and stared at the number I'd had since I was 16, and I changed it. A new number. No more unread apologies. No more graduation silence. No more pretending we were something we weren't. That night, I walked the shoreline until the tide reached my ankles, the surf cool and insistent, washing away any final trace of hesitation. I didn't need their noise anymore. The plan had been 1 week. 7 days to unwind, to reset, to catch my breath. But as my final day approached, something in me refused to go back. The thought of returning to the same familiar spaces, the same polite indifference, the same slow erosion of self, it felt heavier than any suitcase I'd packed. So I walked down to the front desk of the little beach resort, and asked, "Any chance I could extend my stay?" The woman smiled, typing quickly. "How long are we thinking?" I hesitated, then said, "Let's start with 2 more weeks." 2 turned into 4. And somewhere between hiking jungle trails and sipping morning coffee on balconies carved into cliffsides, something shifted. I stopped counting the days. I stopped checking the calendar entirely. I started making small, quiet plans, not for return flights or apologies, but for living. I reconnected with Carlos from the Nature Preserve. He introduced me to Dr. Navarro at the local university, who happened to be looking for someone with a fresh master's degree to help develop a community education program focused on sustainable coastal management. "Your thesis focus is exactly what we need," she said after reading my work. "Someone who understands both the science and the human elements." A quiet woman named Elena who worked with the university's outreach program offered me a place to stay in her family's guest house if I committed to the project. Nothing formal yet, just space, time, a bed, a chance to use my degree for something that mattered. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt real. And I found I liked the rhythm of slow, deliberate days, planning curricula that would actually help people, walking to town barefoot, fixing things with my hands, no expectations, no trying to be what someone else needed. For the first time, I had room to ask myself what I needed. Some days the old doubts crept in. Was I being selfish? Was I running? But every time I walked through the village and someone greeted me by name, or watched local fishermen implementing sustainable practices I'd helped explain, or sat by the sea with a book and no interruptions, I knew the answer. No. I wasn't running. I was finally arriving. It was a Tuesday when it hit me. I was organizing some books for the community program, the sun soft and low over the trees, when I caught my reflection in a dusty window pane. I stopped. It was such a simple thing. My own face, older than I remembered, tanned from weeks in the sun, the crease between my brows finally softening. I barely recognized myself. Not because I looked different, but because for the first time, I looked at peace. There was no audience here. No role to perform. No sibling to outshine or parent to appease. Just me, finally using my education for something that mattered, on the edge of a new life. And I thought, this is who I've always been beneath the noise. It wasn't a grand epiphany, no lightning bolt, just a quiet knowing. The version of me they forgot on my graduation, the one they assumed wouldn't care, was gone. And in his place stood someone sturdier, softer too, not in a fragile way, but in that solid, unshakable way that comes from no longer needing permission to take up space. I hadn't spoken to my family in over a month now. I didn't miss them. Not because I hated them, but because I finally understood the kind of love I had been chasing didn't exist in that house. I'd spent so many years bending myself into versions of the son, the brother, the dependable one they'd accept. And they still didn't. Not because I wasn't enough, but because they never looked closely enough to see what was in front of them. Sometimes, people only value what they lose when it's too far gone to reach. And by then, it's not their right to have it back. I wiped my hands on my shorts and looked around, the books, the porch, the hammock swinging gently in the breeze, and thought, I want to stay. Not just for another few weeks. For good. I never told them I wasn't coming back. I didn't need to. The silence they used to give me? I gave it back, but this time, it had weight, purpose. It wasn't empty. It was full of peace. I changed my number, closed my old accounts, started building a life using the very degree they couldn't be bothered to celebrate. In a beautiful twist of irony, the research I was now developing would likely be published in journals my father might someday read without ever knowing his son wrote the words. The sea is always just a few steps away. I wake up with the sun, fall asleep without worry. Some days are hard, research always is. Some days are beautiful, teaching local children about their ecosystem and watching their eyes light up with understanding. I didn't need a grand finale or some emotional confrontation, just stillness, freedom. And somewhere along the way, I stopped waiting for the people who never saw me to suddenly start trying. Because I see me now, and that's enough. More than enough. Sometimes at sunset, I sit on that same beach where I took the photo that changed everything. I think about that caption, turns out I do care, and smile at how much deeper that truth runs than I even knew then. I care about my work. I care about this place. I care about building a life that doesn't require me to be smaller, quieter, less passionate about the things that matter. And maybe someday, years from now, my family will see my name on research that helps save coastlines like this one. Maybe they'll finally understand what I was trying to tell them all along. Or maybe they won't. Either way, I'll be here. Watching the tide roll in. Caring deeply. Living loudly. Finally heard.